The next question comes from Aaron Kingsley.
My question is to Professor Krauss. Wow. The last time that your good friend Richard Dawkins was on Q&A, he was asked rather mockingly how we can possibly get something from nothing. Being a biologist and not a physicist, Richard respectfully declined to give a comprehensive answer. He mentioned that people often found it hard to deal with the fact that there was nothing before the Big Bang. Yet when you ask the same people what came before God, they often say nothing or that he had always existed. Now that we have you here, could you please give us a more detailed explanation as to how the universe can in fact arise from nothing?
Okay, in a minute. What is amazing, it is an amazing fact, and I watched Richard when he was here, actually trying to explain evolution to Cardinal Pell, who couldn't understand it. But the amazing thing is that one of the things we've learned from science is that our common sense does not necessarily apply to the universe. We evolved to avoid tigers on the plains of Africa, but not to understand quantum mechanics. And so the way the universe really works is very often, as I say, defines common sense. And what is truly remarkable, and the reason I've been talking about it, writing about it lately, is that we understand that, in fact, empty space, which for many people is a good first example of nothing, is actually unstable. Quantum mechanics will allow particles to suddenly pop out of nothing, and it doesn't violate any laws of physics. Just the known laws of quantum mechanics and relativity can produce 400 billion galaxies, each containing 100 billion stars. And then beyond that, it turns out when you apply quantum mechanics to gravity, space itself can arise from nothing, as can time. It seems impossible, but it's completely possible. And what is amazing to me is if you asked what would be the characteristics of a universe that came from nothing by laws of physics, it'd be precisely the characteristics of the universe we measure. And in fact, one of your Australians measured a key part of it and won a Nobel Prize. He's been on this program, my friend Brian Schmidt. And that was completely unexpected. It is amazing that our universe looks exactly like a universe that could have come from nothing. Does that prove it? No. But it makes it plausible. And that is amazing. Just like, in fact, before Darwin, evolution was a miracle, or life was a miracle. Every life form was specially created. Darwin didn't know about DNA and genetics, but when he showed that looking at the evidence, it was plausible that all of the diversity of life could come from a simple beginning. And I find those things worth celebrating, independent of whether they relate to God or not. The universe is unbelievably amazing.
Just before we've got a question on that. I'll just quickly bring in Harold Jansen before I bring in the other panelists.
So if you're claiming that the universe came from nothing, and nothing isn't really nothing, where did the nothing come from?
No, well, look. You know, the interesting thing is science.
Where did the laws of physics come from?
I didn't say it's not nothing. I actually think the point is science changes what we mean by words. So I've discussed with philosophers, and they say, you know what? We don't like your definition of nothing because it's not what Aristotle described. Well, the point is science changes the meaning of things. It's called learning. And you might have said that nothing was an infinite empty void, like the Bible would have said. Well, that would be empty space. Okay? We've learned that that kind of nothing is much more complicated than you thought. There's nothing in it. There's no real particles, but it actually has properties. But then the point is that you can go much further and say there's no space, no time, no universe, and not even any fundamental laws. And it could all spontaneously arise. And it seems to me, if you have no laws, no space, no time, no particles, no radiation, it's a pretty good approximation to nothing.
But Harold actually asked the question, I think you were saying, did the laws of physics equally spring from nothing, fully formed into existence from nothing?
What is surprising is that the conventional wisdom right now, which could be wrong, and that's the other nice thing about science, we don't mind being wrong and changing our minds, unlike religion, but is that in fact, because of discovering that empty space has energy, it seems quite plausible that our universe may be just one universe in what could be almost an infinite number of universes. And in every universe, the laws of physics are different. And they come into existence when the universe comes into existence. So our laws of physics may become, God forbid, forgive me for saying that, but just environmental science.
Could some of those universes have gods creating them?
No, because the point is that, you know, when people say that you need a God to create a universe, you need intelligence to create a universe, then the key question, of course, is well, if God is more complex than the universe, then how could God come into existence? And
Okay,
so
I'm going to let you do that.
I threw that
But
to you.
first of all, Harold is trying to,
forget
he's brave
God.
enough to re-enter this debate.
Yeah, I mean, forget the whole thing about God. What I'm hearing from you is that, hey, these people like Aristotle are addressing nothing, and it's no properties, an empty set. But now, in order for us to answer it, let's change the meaning of the term. So in order to get an answer, let's just change the question altogether.
No. Well, it's true that in science we try and answer questions that are answerable, which is really an important thing, I think. But I would argue that nothing is a physical quantity. It's the absence of something. Okay? So to understand what nothing is, you have to think carefully about what something is. And that's what science tells us. So we're trying to take an empirical approach to try and understand what the absence of something is. And I think there are deep philosophical issues that we're not going to resolve in this program, but I do think...
But they are the problem with what you're saying.
Okay,
this
well,
is where I want to come in.
No, I think we better let John jump in here, or he'll explode. The Big Bang.
There'll be a Big Bang, that's right.
That's all.
Physicists have every right to go and discover things and to propose theories. And Lawrence has a theory that's been out a while that, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you will, that basically there's a vacuum, you've got virtual and antiparticles that pop in and out of existence. They have energy values, but the average energy is zero. They're operating according to the quantum laws. That's nothing. And I just want to say, this is part of the problem with new atheism. It's
science, not atheism.
It's the overreach. Here is a physicist telling us about something that all of us think sounds like something, and saying by some magical change of the English language, no, it's nothing. And if you disagree with me, then you don't understand science. But there are scientists, leading scientists, who agree this ain't nothing. It's a very complex and beautiful something. And I think Tim's point earlier is the key point. We live in a universe that operates according to these elegant, beautiful laws. And when I read your book this week, I was more convinced that that's the case. And this universe operating according to these elegant laws has produced minds that now understand the laws, especially this mind next to us. And so this, to me, all looks, and this is not a proof for God, but I'm just saying why a lot of people think the God thing's got a lot going for it. The whole thing looks rational. The whole thing looks set up to be known. Now, only known in a rational, like the God of Einstein. So then you've got to ask yourself the question, is there any evidence on the world stage that this God we think is maybe just a mind has touched the earth in a tangible way? And for me, if you're asking me why do I think there's a God, it's this philosophy of science plus the life of Jesus.
Well, yeah, but hold on. There was a bait and switch there that I object to, and that was that...
Can I get to the end of the bait?
Well, you said Jesus, and then you started going off. So no longer... Okay.
So what I'm saying is, you ask yourself the question, is there any tangible thing in the history of the world that looks like contact from the God we suspect might be there? The overwhelming, I think, overwhelming evidence points in the direction of Jesus, his life, his teaching, and his healings, his death and resurrection. And when I come to believe that, this opens up the world to me. It's like C.S. Lewis saying, I believe in Christianity for the same reason I believe in the sun, not because I can look at it, but because by it I see everything. And for me, Christianity explains the world I live in such a spooky and deep way that I find I feel I have met the God I had a hunch was there based only on the beautiful, elegant...
Okay, all right, so now we've moved into the... Now I was going to say, I'd like Lawrence to respond to that. We've moved into the area of intuition now. And perhaps we have also with your idea of nothing. And this is the problem, isn't it? We have two competing theories as to how the world came into existence.
Well, I think the point is, I really object when it's two competing theories. A scientific theory is falsifiable, it's testable. God isn't testable. I can't disprove the existence of God. I can't disprove the possibility that we all were created 3 seconds ago with the memories of this delightful conversation we've had. So the point is that
we can
putting
play you
science
back the tape later.
putting science and religion as if they're competing theories does a disservice to science, because science, you know, you can
That's
say
not
that,
what you're hearing from me, though, is
well,
it?
no, it is, because you're saying that explains the world to you. It doesn't. Christianity doesn't explain how airplanes fly, or how. And the bait and switch that worried me is when you say all of this provides clear evidence that there's intelligence or design. The point is the universe
I don't think I said
behaves,
that.
but the universe, if you look at it, it behaves as if there's no purpose to the universe. Now, does that prove there's no purpose? Absolutely not. But a universe that behaves without purpose, and a universe created by God to look like a universe without purpose, well, they might as well be the same to me. It makes God irrelevant, and God is irrelevant.
when
to
I
science.
Okay, I don't want to make the rest of our panel irrelevant. I want to hear how they're responding to your arguments, and I'll start with Tanya Plibersek.
Well, the only thing that I'd like to hear a bit more of is the science of Star Trek.
Yeah, you
Lawrence.
like
So
Star
if we
Trek.
could move the conversation a little bit more to the science of Star Trek, that would be excellent.
I'm happy about that.
No, I'm really enjoying the discussion, Tony. I think the opposition of atheism and science on one side and religion on the other side, I don't think is a fair opposition, though. And I think when you keep talking to Lawrence about the new atheism, that's not the point he's making at all. He's not trying to disprove the existence of God. He's just saying that there's a whole lot of science that explains a lot to us, and that we're learning more about it all the time. And there's a whole lot of things that we can't explain with science yet, but we may well one day. And there's a great example of that at the moment. In the last few years, there's a whole lot of genetic material, junk DNA, that people thought was irrelevant to the way that the human body worked. And all of the time, we're now finding in that junk DNA, the little bits in between, the bits that doctors and scientists have always been interested in, finding that the junk DNA affects the way that the body behaves or responds to drugs, or better treatments can be developed. And I think that that's a really good analogy for our understanding of the world as well. I hope and expect that my children and grandchildren will understand the universe a whole lot better. And one thing, though, Lawrence, I did want to disagree with you on. You talked about we've evolved to kind of escape from tigers, but I think that it is a marvellous thing about the human mind that we have this quest for understanding of how the universe started and how our bodies work, and you know, all of the things that are unclear to us now. It is a beautiful and unique thing about the human mind that we are impelled to ask those questions and to seek answers for them.
Yeah, I just note that you want to hear about the science of Star Trek. I'm
Yes,
just
please.
imagining you sitting in Parliament thinking, beam me up, Scotty.
You should say that.
Go ahead.
We are, in fact, debating the Big Bang in the next parliamentary sitting, so it is quite an amazing...
You serious about that?
of course, as you just watch. It's quite an amazing thing to be in a place where the decisions are made, and you look at all of the different elements of our society. That's one of the things in our profession, that we get to sort of live not just in one sliver, but right across the whole society, whether you're a local member or whether you're looking at national decisions.
Did we just go from the origins of the
wait,
universe
I'm
to...
about to... And,
That's a good. That was
and,
pretty good.
and the point about this is, you know, for years I have sensed it's a real privilege to be where we are. Tonight I asked Lawrence before we came on air, so what came before the Big Bang? And he looked at me and said, I don't think that's a very good question. I'm sure he's treated you in a much more respectful way, but we don't know the answers. We're not going to try to pretend. Lawrence is an extraordinary intellect, but I've asked Brian Schmidt the same question, and he said, look, you could ask the Cardinal or you could ask the physicist or others that same question about what came before the Big Bang. And what it says to me is that we all have to find our own way as to how we best live in this world. The science from the Big Bang to now, I have zero question about that. That to me was settled years ago when I was 11 or 12 or 13. But how we live, that's the question which is interesting in terms of faith and how people find their way through life and how they relate to each other. That's why the two are important and why they have to coexist together.
Cindy Pan.
I think there's fiction and there's non-fiction, but I think there's just as much truth and value and inspiration in fiction as there is in non-fiction. That's why it doesn't surprise me that you find the truths that you find in a story that I don't necessarily think is non-fiction, but I see the truth in it. I think, just to draw an example other people will be familiar with, say the story The Life of Pi. Most people are familiar with that story either because it was a Booker Prize winner or because of the movie. I mean, when you read it, you go through it thinking, sort of suspending belief of, did this really happen? Then, of course, without wanting to spoil it, I mean, at the end, you realise the story had a kind of truth, but it was a completely different truth. And I think, and as the main character said, you know, you believe whichever story you like, but they're both true. They're true, one as an allegory or metaphor, but the truth is the same whichever way you want to look at it. And I think that in terms of the relevance of the truths and how powerful those truths are, obviously from a science and particularly from a medical perspective, the truth of evolution and you know, Darwinism, Mendelian theory, I mean, this is alive and well today. And I was thinking when you were talking about physicists and evolution, I mean, with physicists and scientists and doctors, it is survival of the fittest, because basically if your theory can be destroyed by a fitter or more logical theory, then it will be. So it is the survival of the most logical or more scientific and rigorously thought through theories that prevail and allow then further theories to be built on those theories.
I just want to jump in one more time because you know, it sounded very good what you said, Greg, but however, I mean, it does sound good, but I think your determination of the good life you want to live, to a great extent, is based on science. In fact, you know, it's based on the fact that you shouldn't have slaves, that women actually are equals of men, that all the things that science has ultimately led us to have produced what I think most of what you would describe as a good life. I ask people, if you stopped believing in God, would you go out and murder your neighbor? I've actually had some people say yes, but I think it's not God. It's not that faith. It's rationality, and science has brought a rational view that has led to much of what I think you would describe as the good life that you promote. Presumably.
Okay, I'm going to move along because we've got a couple of issues. I think they